All right, folks, we might make a start. So my name's Andrew Newcomb, I'm the Dean of Learning and Teaching here, and I'd first of all just like to welcome everybody to the Year 8 and 9 Parent Forum. We appreciate the time that parents and the students who have come along tonight have taken to come along to this evening's forum and I guess be more informed and help us ultimately, both by us being able to have this opportunity to inform you and you coming along to be informed. It will help the entire community, helps our job, and will certainly, when it comes to things like subject selection and evenings and other opportunities your students have to ask us about pathways, or if you'd like to be involved in that, which you should be, it makes it a much easier path for all of us. This is a very big change to systems, but it's also a change to the way we run things in terms of the way we teach in pedagogy, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. And some of the things that I'll talk about tonight will touch on information that has come out over the last 12 months. There have been some updates to that, so I will first of all very shortly give a brief summary of those changes, just so everybody here first of all has a clear understanding of what the changes actually are. The new system, as I said, has necessitated a lot of changes, and those have been done not just with learning and teaching. There has been a collaborative effort throughout the school and various parts of the school, as well as SLT, our senior leadership team, has been very involved in discussing all aspects that will be affected by the change to ensure that whatever changes are made to learning and teaching also has a positive impact on all elements of the school, because we do pride ourselves, of course, on giving your students a very holistic education. So the impact that it has will be significant, and you will see evidence of that throughout the school in the next few years as your students are the first ones to move through this new system. Mr. John Christie, our Director of Learning and Teaching, will elaborate on some of those structures and how students will consider their subject choices. Ms. Lara Morgan, our Director of Pathways, will then speak in more detail about our pathway opportunities and the mechanisms that we will have in place to assist your students throughout that journey. There will then be an opportunity to ask questions of us in a Q&A forum to conclude the evening. And this tonight, as you will be aware, has been streamed, and it'll also be on our website and in next week's newsletter. Put a copy of the video of tonight on there, and there'll also be some photos of the night in the newsletter as well. So anyone who wants their photo in the newsletter, tonight's a fantastic opportunity to be part of that. I'd also like to introduce Miss Jodie Moore, who I can't see because of the bright lights. There's Jodie. Jodie's our Director of Teacher Growth and Development. Jodie's job is significant through this change because it does bring about a number of changes in the way in which we go about teaching students, which means our classroom, the way we teach collaboratively, 21st century skills and a more modern, I guess, approach to teaching and learning that is designed specifically to suit modern workplaces and universities. It's part of the syllabus requirements in the senior system. So Jodie's job will very much be with staff, and has been with staff, in ensuring that the professional development opportunities and how we go about doing that is well covered, and teachers have been well prepared for that. There are a lot of different stresses in this system for how teachers perform. There'll probably be a lot more spotlight on teachers, especially those who teach senior subjects. So we need to make sure, and we are making sure, that teachers are well prepared for that, so that we're very much ahead of the game in terms of what we present and how we teach your students. I'd also like to welcome and thank Mr. Peter Felger, our principal, who I also can't see, I think he's at the back there somewhere, for his attendance tonight, primarily in his support for what we're doing tonight, and obviously it's a good chance for you to catch up with him hopefully at the end of the night, and make sure that if you have questions for him, please, he'd be very accommodating and very encouraging of you catching up with him and talking about these processes as well. All aspects of the school, including our deputy principal and principal, have been involved in discussions in terms of how we go about making these changes. So certainly he's as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable, than the rest of us on these changes. So thank you, Peter, for your attendance tonight. Just before we get started, I'd like us to just gather ourselves in a comfortable position. We'll open with a prayer. Please feel free, if you are comfortable, saying the prayer out loud with me as well. So in voice and in action, in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. As we go forth about our day, O God, as we strive to walk with Jesus as people of commitment, open our eyes to our capacity to make a difference. Open our eyes to the needs of those around us. May your grace, mercy and peace bless us, keep us and transform us all this day, now and forever. Live Jesus in our hearts. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So as I said, I'll quickly go through some of these changes, some of which you may be aware of. Some of these have been presented in a slightly longer format in different forums or different nights on the year, but there have been some changes, so I'll be very brief with this and just make sure we understand what the changes are before both John and Lara speak about how it's going to affect us and what decisions we've made. So the Australian Admission Tertiary Rank, the Queensland Government, as you know, will introduce that system. The current Year 9 students are the first ones through the new system. So subject selection for them this year, and John will talk about that shortly, will be an important part of that process as they move through. But the key changes that in terms of, I guess, administrative changes, the key changes there will be the way we assess students, and the obvious one, the most outstanding one that people would talk about and the media has presented, is our change from an OP system to an ATAR system. That lines us up with the other states. For those of you who are at information nights in the year would be aware, or if you've been keeping up with this, every state in Australia has an ATAR except Queensland. And that ATAR will be a much finer grained score for your children. It'll be a 0 to 99.95, going up in increments of 0.05, which is effectively 2,000 different scores they could get as opposed to the 25 that they can get right now. The OP system also has seen a dramatic fall in the number of students getting an OP, and part of that's been because of a positive that Queensland has that other states don't have. But currently, they've moved from the high 80%, maybe 15 years ago, to only about 50% of students in Queensland getting an OP now, which means they've taken just essentially the top half, not exactly, but the students who would have been the top half and are now just getting the 1 to 25 spread out between them. So it's less of a relevant mark. There are a lot of students in Queensland. We have a lot of different pathways, and some of you who've had older students pass through the school will be aware of the fact that you don't need an OP to go to university in Queensland. So a lot of the students are now currently taking easier pathways or more appropriate pathways to get there. So it's eroded very much the OP system. So apart from the fact that it doesn't line up with other states, it's also a system that, due to other methods that students can use to get to university, it itself has been eroded to the point where it's becoming less and less relevant every year. So our current system, just some significant changes in terms of what you would see in the way we assess students and the way we operate internally. Our current system only has internal assessment, and we have a lot of flexibility with that. So, for example, we have minimum requirements that we write our own work programs for, and that's where it ends. You might have maths at our school. Our maths subjects, for example, we do the bare minimum of assessment items, which is 6 in senior. I've seen schools do up to 15 assessment items in maths in senior. They might be smaller, but they basically have the flexibility to do what they want because it's purely an internal system. Typically, a subject would normally have 6 or 7, but a student doing 6 subjects in senior would feasibly have between 40 and 50 assessment items in a 38-week year. And some of those weeks are exam blocks. So effectively, it's probably only 33 weeks of learning in which they're doing up to 50 assessment items in Year 12. In the new system, it is a combination of internal and external work. But even the internal work that we do in the new system is very heavily prescribed in Year 12. In Year 11, we have a lot of freedom to do what we want. And obviously what we will be doing is lining that up very much so that the students become very skillful and very well prepared for the senior exams in Year 12. But essentially in Year 12, every subject will have 4 assessment items. 3 of those will be internal and 1 of those will be an external subject, no matter what subject you're doing. And that we'll use those to derive a result out of 100 for each subject. For most subjects, 75% of their score will come from the 3 internal items and 25% for the external. That does not mean that the 3 internal items are worth 25% each. In fact, in most subjects they're not. But from their 3 internal exams they do, or assessment items they do, that will contribute to a total of 75% of the grade, and the external exam will count for 25%, except in maths and science, where it's a 50-50 split. In southern states, it's about a 67% is just on their last exam. So in Queensland, we still have a fair bit of weighting for the students on their internal assessment while they work here. But even within that, it's much more prescribed. So once again, from school to school at the moment, we all have our own assessment items. They all can look very, very different, both in the nature of the assessment and the way in which we assess. The new system will be much more prescribed, which also has a big effect on how we teach and how we prepare students, not just in Year 11 and 12, but also all the way back to Year 7 and very shortly back to Year 5, the way we go about assessing and teaching students. It's currently a back-ended approach, so you can probably imagine some of the problems that you might have in an internal system. If we're doing completely different assessment to every school in Queensland because we're making that ourselves, I guess the issue of fairness comes in, are we all treating the students the same? So the amount of work done at the end of the year in Queensland is significant. It's quite amazing the amount of time and effort spent then at the end of it judging. And of course, schools that haven't quite got it right, there's a lot of negotiation and discussion around that because it is a back-ended approach. The new system will have a front-ended approach. So even the internal assessment that we use now will have all been pre-approved almost a year before we give the assessment. So there's almost a guarantee, or as close to a guarantee as we can give on internal assessment, that anything the students get, whether they're at Sandgate High, Nudgee, Gregory Terrace, wherever, even though we still have our own assessments, they're all the same standard because they've been approved by the QCAA and we can't change those. The marking schemes will also be very, very prescribed as well, so it's a little bit more consistency there. So the new system will allow for that. We also currently use a moderating test, which most, if not all of you will know about. That's a QCS test, which then moderates subjects. In the new system, there will be no moderation test. The subjects will be scaled against each other. It's quite a complex way of doing that, but it does do that quite fairly. So they'll be looking at every student in Queensland and their achievement in different subjects and using those results to be able to scale subjects. So subjects that are deemed or are considerably harder than other subjects will still carry, ultimately, a higher weighting. But every student will still just get a mark out of 100 for each of their subjects based on their results, which they will be able to access as they do them. So as they do their assessment during the year, we will upload that to the QCAA website and students can log on and watch how they're going as they go through the year. So tertiary entrance, QTAC will then take those results and they will now calculate the ATAR as opposed to the QCAA, which now does a lot of work calculating OPs, and I guess we don't need to talk too much about that, but that is a significant change. You must complete an English subject to be ATAR eligible. That doesn't have to be an ATAR English subject. It can be what's called an applied subject, which doesn't contribute to an ATAR. It can contribute in a small way, which I'll discuss in a moment. But if you do that subject called Essential English, it's not a prerequisite for university courses, generally speaking, anyway. So most subjects who want to get an most students who want to get an ATAR will complete one of the higher level English subjects that we have, but it does not need to count towards their ATAR. We'll use their best 5 subjects. So that is similar to the current OP system. One of those subjects could be a VET Cert 3 subject or higher, or what's called an applied subject, which is like a pre-voc maths and English comm in the current system. They've got different names in the system. In the new system, recreation's another one we have here. So they can do an applied subject and have that count. It will not weight very highly, so it'll be very difficult to get a really strong ATAR if you're doing an applied subject as one of yours, as well as a Cert 3 or a Cert 4. A diploma course will count slightly higher and weightings will be applied to those as well. They can use one. It does render Cert 1s and 2s a little bit irrelevant in terms of the ATAR, but of course a Cert 1 and a Cert 2 is still a qualification in its own right. No VET schedules or ATAR ineligible ranks. So what I was talking about earlier on about different systems in Queensland that we allow that other states don't tend to allow, students can go non-OP at the moment and get qualifications or do certs and get what's called an OP equivalent ranking and go straight into university on that as long as they've done an English subject and any prerequisites. So we have a lot of students here and across Queensland there's a significant number of students who take that up, and that's one of the main reasons the current OP system's been eroded. When we move to an ATAR, if you want to go to university will now start almost solely, but not entirely, go back to using an ATAR. So the numbers will probably go back up very high to university aspiring students doing a course that will get them an ATAR to get into university, like people in other states of Australia currently do. So I'd now like to call Mr. John Christie to the stage, and he's going to talk a little bit about subject selection and how we go about structuring our timetable from now on. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Andrew. Good evening, everyone. As Andrew just mentioned, my job for the next hopefully 10 minutes will be to explain the subject selection process and how that leads into from year 9, year 10 and into boys' senior studies. Just thought I'd share a couple of things with you. Hopefully they come up. A couple of conversations I have with boys over the last couple of years since I've been at Nudgee. I handle a lot of subject selection queries, so I thought I'd just share, 4 little conversations that I've had with boys from time to time. They're probably not word for word, but they're very much similar to the conversations that I've had. I quite like the first one on the top left. Originally, or when I first started, boys would come to me in pairs and they would say to me, "Sir, we'd like to change subject." I used to think, we or you? both of them would band together before they'd come to my office, and they would sit there and say, okay, which subject do we want to go to? So I would quite often have boys come to me wanting to change subject in pairs. Even had at one stage, I think I had 3 boys come into my office wanting to change out of one subject and into the other. They've become a little bit smarter lately. One will come to me on a Tuesday, and then the next one will come to me on a Wednesday. They even know which class or which line lines up, so they do go into the same class together. Quite an interesting story, and I'll tell you why I share that with you in a moment. All of these, I guess, little statements have something in common. They all represent either misinformation or not so great motives for choosing particular subjects. Unfortunately, too many times do the staff, myself, Andrew, Lara, in the Learning and Teaching Office, hear statements like the ones from like those ones above from our boys. So before we have a look at the specifics of the subject selection process and how that leads into Year 11 and Year 12 for your sons, it's important that we emphasise how we would encourage your son and also you as his parents to go about the subject selection process. So I guess in the Learning and Teaching Office we work off sort of 3 main rules, and this is the advice that we give your sons. So the first rule is that students should pick subjects that they enjoy. Nothing stifles achievement more than a lack of motivation because a subject isn't enjoyable and interesting. Right, so choosing subjects that provide high levels of engagement is one key to your son's success in the subjects that he chooses. Second rule of choosing subjects is to choose ones that your son is good at. Nothing undermines the subject selection process more than misinformation or misleading statements that turns a student away from studying what he is good at. Choosing subjects based on their apparent appeal or their apparent importance, listening to comments from previous Year 11 and 12 students, all can erode an effective course of study. So again, that second dot point I would say is make sure they're doing something that they're good at. And the third one, last piece of advice we would give in terms of subject selection, is to make sure that subjects that he chooses are leading him in a direction leading into Year 11 and Year 12 when he's choosing subjects in Year 9 and 10, but also for his pathways following school. I'm sure many of you would see this as being maybe more important than 1 and 2. Surely pathways are important, but by choosing prerequisites for a course such as engineering at QUT, Maths B, English being those prerequisites, some boys would say, well, I'm assured of a place if I choose those 2. But keep in mind that the student that takes on Maths B and isn't capable of studying Maths B or doesn't enjoy Maths B may struggle to achieve highly, and that then, I guess, eliminates the positivity out of taking that particular subject and trying to achieve that prerequisite. So there needs to be a pinch of common sense in there. For some it needs to be a truckload at times. And I would probably, in the kindest way, say to parents, your sons aren't all going to become engineers. They have, at this early stage, some boys have a pathway in mind. Let them pursue that, but keep in mind those 3 dot points there, or those 3 rules. So in 2018, subject selection will change a little bit. How many hands up here, boys who are going into Year 9 next year, or parents with boys going into Year 9? Okay, and what about Year 8? We've got any Year 8 parents and boys? We've got a small number, okay, getting in early. Year 9 students will continue to study 5 core subjects. So they'll have their English, their maths, religious education, science and humanities. They will, however, choose 4 elective subjects. 2 will be studied in semester 1 and 2 will be studied in semester 2. All right, so they'll get that exposure to 4 elective subjects. And again, choosing those subjects that they're good at, that they enjoy, and that potentially lead to subjects in Year 11 and Year 12, we would be encouraging that. There's probably a slight exception to that, and that's those students that enjoy and want to study music and or Japanese. Music can be studied as Music 1 and Music 2 in Semesters 1 and Semester 2, and Japanese is the same. Because they are quite specialist subjects, there is a real continuity between Year 8, Year 9, Year 10 into Year 11 and 12 Japanese, and the same with music. We would encourage them, if they're going to pursue music or Japanese, then to study Music 1 in Semester 1 and then Music 2. For Year 9 students selecting subjects for Year 10, this is where the most significant change has occurred. Why this change has been made I'll explain that in a couple of slides. But in essence, every subject offered in the new Year 11 and 12 program has a preparatory subject in Year 10. And again, I'll explain that in a moment. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about there. So in Year 11, obviously the course of study in English, it has a preparatory subject called Preparatory English in Year 10. Same for economics. If a boy wants to study economics in Year 11 and Year 12, he'll study Preparatory Economics in Year 10. And the same with any certificate or vet courses. We will have a preparatory subject for those subjects in Year 11 and 12 back in Year 10. This is probably one of the most important concepts for the night, important points about our subject selection, and this will be potentially an area for some questions at the end of the night. So if this isn't 100% clear, be sure that we will try and clarify that for you at the end of the night as part of the forum. So study in Year 11 and 12 is made up of 4 units per subject. And without going through each subject, and as Andrew has already alluded to, assessment looks very different when compared to the current system. A heavy emphasis on examinations that test significant bodies of work is a real highlight for the boys coming up. All right, so they are going to be quite big, and I say that very tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But as part of the new system, examinations and examining larger bodies of work is going to be quite evident. No longer will just one term of work be assessed. In general, most subjects will test 25% or 1 unit of work at a time. At the end of Year 12, again, as Andrew has said, a year's worth of work will be assessed in many subjects, and with up to 50% of the student's result based on that external exam. So a real focus there of subject and knowledge retention. And this is why our Year 10 system has been, we've introduced those preparatory subjects in Year 10. So I guess with this final external assessment period being of significant importance and held halfway through Term 4, so those external exams will be held in weeks 4, 5 and 6 of Term 4, where we've been told that by the QCAA. We feel that we can't rely on the current calendar allowing us to complete Unit 4 in the first part of Semester 2. So because we're determined to continue to offer a Nudgee education, all of those things that make up the fabric of Nudgee, the retreats, those service opportunities, participation in house events, everything that makes Nudgee what it is, we've made the decision to roll out the Year 11 and 12, the Year 11 first unit at the beginning of Term 4 in Year 10. So you can see Unit 1 up there starts in Term 4 of Year 10, to give us that time to finish all of our work by the end of Term 3. And then what will happen in Term 4, boys will come back in weeks 1, 2 and 3. We haven't quite, I think, 100% worked out what that will look like, but we know it will be an intense period of revision and study, running tutorials for the boys in preparation for those external exams at the end of, or in weeks 4, 5 and 6 of Term 4. So I guess if there's one key message other than how to go about selecting subjects, is that changing subjects during 11 and 12 is a bit more problematic than it has been in the past. So at the moment, in the Learning and Teaching Office, we're changing quite a number of subjects because we've finished semester 1 and we're moving into semester 2, and we base boys on semesters of work. So there are a number of boys, and they're across all year levels. But in year 11 and 12, that will be a little bit more problematic with the new system, because units will flow on. There'll be a prerequisite of knowledge from potentially Unit 1 that will flow into Unit 2. So if a boy hasn't studied Unit 1, he's behind the 8 ball from the beginning. If you have a look at Unit 4, that external exam and examining a whole year's worth of work, changing subject midway through Year 12 will be problematic. So subject changes we will try and lessen by offering those preparatory subjects at Year 10. And I hope that makes sense at this stage. Time for questions at the end if that wasn't clear. But that's the rationale behind changing the way that we're running our subject selection. I'll hand over to Lara Morgan now to speak about set plan processes and pathways. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lara Morgan and I'm the Director of Pathways here at the college. What I love about my job is that I get to work with individual students to enable them to choose subjects that allow them to find success and build pathways that allow them to create opportunity through their education. And that's pathways here at the school through their senior journey, but also pathways beyond school. I often work with students when it comes to their university application or when applying for employment immediately after school. Tonight you've heard Andrew speak about the new tertiary entrance score, the ATAR, and you've heard Mr. John Christie speak about subject selection in the senior schooling system. Tonight I get to talk to you about the wonderful processes and support that we'll have in place for your son while he makes these decisions to create opportunity through his senior education. We refer to the process at the end of Year 9 as the SET plan process. And SET plan stands for Student Education and Training Plan. Prior to completing that document, students go through various psychometric tests and will also explore elements of their personality. They'll complete Myers-Briggs testings that show them their strengths within the multiple intelligences. They will learn what their individual strengths and weaknesses are, and they'll use this information to do some career exploration. So through that testing, they're going to find out careers that suit their personality, their strengths and weaknesses, but more importantly, careers where they'll find enjoyment and they'll find success. So students will spend a few lessons going through that, and then they will actually select 3 different careers and look at those 3 in more detail and compile their SET plan document. So the SET plan document will nominate what that career field is, and then they'll look at the subject prerequisites that enable them to be prepared for that university course or pathway and satisfy the subject prerequisites set by the university. And they will ensure that these are in line with their current results. One of the fantastic opportunities we'll have here at Nudgee in their senior schooling is the ability for students to be mentored through their senior journey. So at the end of Year 9, once their SET plan is created, all students will meet with their mentor, who will be a member of the senior leadership team or the college leadership team who work within curriculum. So students will have a mentor that they will discuss their SET plan with, and they will then visit that mentor every 6 months throughout their senior journey to ensure that they're on track to achieve their goals and to continue to set goals in order to obtain success and to reach their full potential. In their initial mentor meeting, they will discuss the SET plan document, and it will be signed off and a copy of that will be sent to parents. Students will discuss their career choice, their subject choice and pathway, but we'll also look at other data and information, particularly around testing results within English and maths. There are quite a number of subjects in those 2 areas, And different university courses will have different prerequisites and nominate different English subjects or math subjects. So this is a really good opportunity for the mentor and the student to meet and to ensure that the subjects they've chosen, in particular in these two areas, to ensure that students will find success. You will have heard Andrew mention that students must pass in English to obtain an ATAR score. It's important that these results are taken seriously and that students are able to select a subject here that is in line with their results and ability. I think the advantage here at Nudgee College is that students will be able to test run their senior schooling in Year 10. And I'm a parent and have two young boys, and I understand that some of you may be a little concerned that your sons are choosing perhaps senior subjects or pathways earlier, but I actually think this is a fantastic advantage to your son's education. In essence, the boys are able to test run their senior schooling, and with their mentor, they're able to see what their results are, where their successes lie, and we can then alter that slightly to ensure that the boys are getting the best from their education. If any of us were given $1 for a boy to come to our office with results that probably aren't the best, and for them to say, oh no, but next year's Year 11 or Year 12, I'm going to try harder. I'm definitely trying harder. You know, we could probably have quite a nice overseas holiday each year. I think this gives boys who meet with a mentor and say, well, this is what I'm choosing in Year 10, but I'm going to try harder. They get to meet with that mentor 6 months later and see whether they have. And with maturity, sometimes boys are able to knuckle down a little more in Year 10, but they're given an opportunity to try harder with subjects. And like I said, we can always alter their subject choice if needed to ensure that they are able to find success in their pathway. Mr. John Christie made a really good comment earlier tonight saying that students need to find a pathway that allows them to find success. And Nudgee continues to offer your sons success through various pathways. At Nudgee, we'll have two pathways that students don't necessarily nominate, but will follow according to their subject selection. So students can choose any combination of subjects, and that will then determine whether they are on an ATAR pathway or a work and further study pathway. Now, an ATAR pathway is designed primarily for students to enter university. That's why the ATAR score was designed. It's not going to suit all students that may be interested in employment or may be interested in further study before attending university. The work and further study pathway is exactly that. It creates opportunity because boys will be able to have two options, either employment, an apprenticeship or a traineeship or full-time work, or they can still continue to study and create a pathway to university. So I think that both are very valuable pathways that students can choose according to their ability and their passion. It's important to note that both pathways allow students to achieve their QCE. That remains constant as we move to the ATAR tertiary entrance score. That system hasn't changed. Students will still need to pass 20 semesters of senior schooling or obtain points through VET qualifications in order to get their QCE. And the QCE is a document that shows that a student has achieved or successfully passed Year 12. It's the Queensland Certificate of Education. So the work and further study pathway allows students to obtain many qualifications that can allow them to gain employment. And these qualifications can be offered at Nudgee College or in partnership with TAFE and other private institutions. So we have the Cert 1 in construction and a Certificate 2 in engineering pathways, and both of those give a student time off if they're going to follow an apprenticeship beyond school. You'll see that we're also going to offer a Certificate 3 in business and a Certificate 3 in engineering design, and those are two qualifications that can be included in an ATAR pathway or be used as part of the work and further study pathway. We'll also be looking at, on the Cert 3 of fitness as well, sorry. We'll also be looking at offering the Diploma of Business outside of school hours that students can use as well. With our partnership in TAFE in schools, we'll be offering a whole array of qualifications that vary from Certificate 1 to Certificate 4 level and allow students to obtain or gain qualifications in various fields. And those fields are everything from healthcare to visual art, hairdressing and makeup, which I've never had a boy enrol in, and also justice studies and things that can lend into criminology and those areas. So what's really good about the TAFE in Schools program is that students can choose an area that they're really passionate about, get a qualification in that area that creates that employment opportunity, but they can also lead them to further study later on in life or when they finish school. These TAFE qualifications require students to attend either Southbank or Bracken Ridge campus 1 day a week, and therefore those students would be on a work and further study pathway rather than an ATAR pathway. I encourage you to ask any questions that you may have about pathway choice or about the SET plan process, and I welcome Andrew back to the microphone before we move to our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, John, for those. Folks, we will now move into a question and answer. For anyone who has any questions for us, please, now's a very good time to ask, and trust in the fact that if you have questions, there's every chance that there are other people in the room who are probably thinking of the same question. So please, if you have any questions, ask us now. Jodie Moore has a microphone she'll bring around. Well, we'll do this about 15 minutes or so, at which time we'll conclude the evening. Having said that, the four of us will be around down here afterwards. If you need to come and ask us any questions after that, please, you're welcome to do that. I mentioned before that Mr. Fulger's here tonight. If you want to have a chance to chat to him, please do. I think I just negated the opportunity for him to make a sneaky exit, so might not be me doing this speech next year, but either way, he's here tonight, so it's a good opportunity to see him. But at the end of the night, please feel free to come up and talk to us. We're more than happy to talk to you as much as possible. The more you know, the more it makes our job much easier. So I'd just thank John and Lara for their speech tonight, and please, we'll go to 15 minutes or so of questions. Thank you.
I have a question with regards to weightings of the different subjects. Is there advanced knowledge of that, so we get an idea of the weightings of the subjects when the boys choose them, how they'll actually weight further on, as opposed to finding out after?
In terms of the general subjects, which are the equivalent of the OP subjects now, no, not a lot, because what they're going to do is use a well-developed mathematical system of comparing students against students. I guess in a very simplistic term, the way the model works is if everyone here does English, and then if a group of us did physics and a group of us did health ed, they can start to ascertain based on English marks, but they're going to actually line up every single subject against every single subject, which is literally hundreds of thousands of calculations to start to line up with where subjects would settle. But having said that, if the QCS has been doing its job over the last 25 years, I would be very surprised if the weightings that are currently applied by the QCS test, which is what it does, would not be too dissimilar to what's going to happen in the long term. And I don't know if, Laura, do you want to talk about the weightings for...
Yeah. With regards to weighting, it does rely on the amount of rigour involved in a subject. So an A in Maths C is not equivalent to an A in Maths A. So with regards to weightings, you can use an element of common sense determined by the amount of rigour required by a subject. With regards to VET qualifications, they will be announced, and they haven't been announced officially as yet. We do know that a Certificate 3 is equivalent to a low C in English. And so a Certificate 4 and a diploma will be at a level higher than that, but they haven't stated what that will be at this stage.
I'll just add to that as well. Our advice to students will be, and continues to be now, they should be choosing subjects based on what they enjoy and what they think they will achieve. And even now, we don't know the weightings now. The QCS does that naturally every year. It just so happens that in most years, the subjects tend to line up relatively similar to how they do from year to year. So it won't be that much different. The students won't know the weightings so much when they start, just as they actually don't know the weightings now. They have to wait till they've done the QCS test, and that happens naturally each year, if that answers the question.
I was wondering, with subjects like chemistry, physics, that are traditionally offered in Year 11 and 12, how will that fit with your model of having Semester 1 or Unit 1 running in Year 10? I haven't seen the Year 10 subject selections as my son's in Year 8 going into Year 9. So how will that work?
Each of those Year 11 and Year 12 subjects, and I know I only listed a couple before that had preparatory subjects, but all of our subjects that we offer in Year 11 and Year 12, whether they be our general subjects or, you know, vet and certificate subjects, will all have preparatory subjects. So a boy who's looking to study physics and chemistry in Year 11 and Year 12 will be able to select preparatory physics and preparatory chemistry at the beginning of Year 10.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a question about the mentors.
Yeah, no, it's for the live.
Oh, really? Okay. Hi, I've got a question about the mentors. How exactly are they chosen or selected for each of the boys? Because obviously that can be make quite a difference in the relationship.
Sure. The mentors are compiled from senior leaders of the college. So the college leadership team and senior leadership team that have knowledge of curriculum areas, and they'll go through a professional development course or PD that will allow them to be able to give the right advice to a student. So it's important that the teachers with that education are meeting the students. In terms of aligning a student to a mentor, there is no real rhyme or reason. It's, at the moment, a certain number of students will just be given to a mentor. But I think for a lot of the students...
House-based.
Yeah, but they won't be in this one. But for a lot of the students, it may be the first time they're meeting this senior leader, but their presence in the senior schooling will allow them to develop a relationship that I think that will enhance that relationship, and they'll work with that mentor more throughout their senior schooling. I hope.
It's not going to be matched so much on personality, it's just his group, you know.
Yeah, I think so. It's you meet for 10 to 20 minutes every 6 months, but I mean, when you have your students that are your mentored students, when you see them around the playground, you start to develop that relationship where you'll say, so how did the weekend go, or how did that exam go, and it develops from there.
Hi, I've got a question about the set plan process. Is that being carried out now before the boys select their subjects for next year?
Yes, so when they meet with their mentor with the set plan, the subjects that they discuss with the mentor is at the stage where those subjects are then kind of locked in, so to speak. So that's when the subjects are entered into our computer systems after that meeting. So they will go through all that psychometric testing and the exploration of their personality prior to completing the set plan. The set plan it's a Google document, but it's PDF'd and sent to parents, and the student then meets their mentor at the end of that, and that's when their subjects are locked in.
Obviously, at the moment, for those parents who have students in grade 9 or grade 8, it's still a way off and you're still planning. But in the future, will you be holding forums such as this to discuss with us how our child can study for an exam that's going to be worth 50% and how you're going to be teaching the boys to be ready for that?
Definitely. We'll be holding forums as we get feedback and as we feel there's a need to give information to parents. We think this is a great environment to do that in. So obviously there are many mechanisms in the school in which we can pass information out, but in terms of being able to have this sort of access and give this amount of information out, a forum's a great idea. So we'll be considering what forums are most relevant. You're more than welcome to email us and ask questions or suggest things, because if we feel that there's a lot of parents asking these questions, that helps us in our decision-making process. That's when we'll sit up and think, oh, there's a lot of parents asking about this, we need to either do this or have a forum and that sort of thing. So it's a great question, and yes, we think this is a great night, and we do get well supported here, so it's a two-way system. If we feel we're well supported, we're more than happy to give up the time to come and do these, because it suits us as well.
We've had some external trials at the school in different subject areas, and we've held forums for the students in the lead up to those. Would that be right in saying that, Mr. Newcombe? To prepare them for that style of testing. So that's something that we have already done and will continue to do.
Am I correct in thinking that the current Year 9 boys have their subject selection information evening in August, and a few weeks or within a week or two they make their subject selection in August, from what I've read? Yet when does they have that final meeting with their mentor to make the final subject selection? How many months do you see being between that process?
We're hoping to roll the set plan process out soon, as in the next couple of weeks, and the students will be given plenty of time to complete those tests. They're all completed online, and parents are also going to be sent login details so that they are able to go into the online account and look at the results from that testing. The more conversations the boys have with parents and staff and their mentor, I think the better for students to make those decisions, and they'll go through that at length before they're required to formalise their set plan document and then to meet with their mentor. But yes, the timeline is tight, but they're going to be given plenty of time to do that.
Can I just ask, are the students ranked like they are now against each other in the school before, over here, before they go and sit those final exams, so they know where they're sitting?
No, you're talking about Year 12 students as they
yeah, like they're ranked this year.
No, one of the great things about the new system is we don't need to create a spread anymore. We're not comparing students against students. Even though all the rhetoric you'll hear in the last 5 years about the Queensland system is about how we're criteria referenced and the students a mid-B is a mid-B, that is correct as we mark, but all we do with that at the end of Year 12, as some of you may know, is we then do a pure rank order and which we start to do when we do the IP predictions for those who've been part of that process as well. There'll be no more of that. The students are not compared against each other. So there's an opportunity for all students to excel and not then be put, you might be doing very well, but if you're in the bottom half of your cohort, you get pushed backwards. That system will go in the new system. And I think that's one of the benefits. I don't think you'll get too much disagreement there. If we achieve very good results here and they all achieve well, they all will get a good mark and not be pushing other kids behind them. Yeah.
Just to add one thing to that. Some discussion around, obviously the rankings has come up at a state level. The QCAA have assured us that before boys move into those external examinations at the end of Year 12, they will know their cumulative number of marks that they've got in the previous internal assessment pieces as they go in. So there's no unknowns as they get. Well, the only unknown will be their performance on the external exams, but there are no other unknowns. A boy will know if the external exam is out of 25, that final external exam, he will know how many marks out of 75 he has already received going into that.
So I just have a question with the choices they make in the Year 10. Are they becoming prerequisites then for Year 11 and 12? Like if they take those subjects and then they decide that they want to change, what happens then?
Not entirely, because the aim in Year 10 is to try and find the subjects you think you're going to like. As our current system stands, for example, we have a number of Year 11 subjects that don't exist in their exact format in Year 10. For example, we have economics and law as a subject, but then in Year 11 you can choose economics and or law. We have phys chem, where they do a bit of physics and a bit of chemistry. So we already have a system where you can't quite line them up. So the system is designed to give them a taste and hopefully in Year 10 apply that rigour and see. But we would hope that students who realise either because of the content or their achievement it isn't the subject for them, Year 10's a time to change. But to answer your question, no, Unit 1, which starts in Term 4, Year 10, will be the start of that course. And theoretically you could start a Unit 1 course from scratch, but we would hope they'll have had some sort of taste of that before they get there.
My question relates to the preparation for both students and teachers. Under the current Queensland system, we have 25 years of QCS past papers, and the whole industry has evolved around preparing students and doing past papers and so on. New South Wales and Victoria, they spend that Term 4 doing past papers, an enormous bank of resources. Now, it's going to ultimately be great, But in the first couple of groups through, we have no bank of resources. Currently, the current students, they can actually go to a QCS website and get past papers. And what are we going to do for that? Because I don't think QCAA are going to be writing them.
They will put out some resources, but can I also add to that, down south, yes, we have QCS resources, but down south, and all in other states, not all south states are south of us, of course, but what they do is a lot of companies. So, for example, some of our QCS resources aren't just past papers. There are companies that provide us with resources. Well, there'll probably be a lot of companies, and also, for example, Maths Association, English Association, they normally prepare a lot of sample papers, because what the QCAA will do is put out sample papers in the style they're going to be, and then we'll have companies and professional organisations also making a big bank to start with. So although we will be able to gather resources as we go, there will be a readily available bank of resources to start with. So I know from down south, for example, every year there are about 10 to 12 companies that give you a new one every single year to try. So there will be a large number of resources that we'll have access to and are planning on attaining before we start.
It's a really easy question. Is there somewhere that we can actually see what the subject choices are? Like, is it on the portal or something where we can actually look at what their choices are going to be, so that we can talk to them now about, you know, sort of stimulating ideas of where they're going to go?
Yes, we have a subject section website. Is that what you mean? With the subjects on there? Yeah. That was sent, unless you're currently year 8 has one. Is it currently year 8? Yeah, you should have the Year 9 website. If you don't have one, email me and I'll send you the link again. Yeah. Oh, we can send it out to everyone if you need. Okay, we'll resend the link. It normally goes out at the start of the... Yeah, start of the holidays, because we like to give people the holidays to talk to those, but yeah, first start of the holidays.
Lara, my question's for you. With the testing, they obviously have the subject selection evening or the information evening on the 15th of August. Mm-hmm. My understanding is it's first in, best dress for selecting the subjects. I may have misunderstood that. In like the following couple of days. So that testing won't necessarily be finalised before they have to choose the subjects. I'm just trying to get the timeline right.
Sorry, can you explain what you mean about the first in, best dressed?
Oh, I got the impression that the boys had to actually put in, to be able to do a subject, they won't necessarily get their first options. The sooner they put their options in, the better. That's not...
No, that's not the case. Okay. The timetable's built depending on the student selection. We can't tell them whether they will get their choice immediately. The timetable's created around the number of students that wish to study a certain subject.
Yep.
Sorry. So that's first of all. Second of all, the psychometric testing will occur before the set plan is created by the student. So that will be the first step in this whole process. So their first meeting that they will have with a classroom teacher for the students looking at their pathway within the school will be completing psychometric testing and personality tests online.
So before the 15th of August, because that's when they
right,
come for
yeah. In the next couple of weeks,
okay.
We'll be getting this journey.
Sure. Thank you.
Can I just add to that, because some schools do have a system where the timetable is pre-built, and there's then some students do have to go with a second preference, but we have an exceptional system here where we get the data from students first and then we start the timetable once it's in. So our rate of giving students what they want is exceptionally high. In fact, last year I think it might have been about 100% of students got their choice. So we pride ourselves on that.
My question's about the change in semesters that you showed us on the screen. So effectively, just clarifying that end of year 11, end of year 10, sorry, you've got beginning of year 11 in term 4. So the year 10s will have 3 terms to complete their assessment and reporting. And therefore, the collaboration that you've had with other schools, my question is, are other schools aligning with that timetable as well?
There are a lot of schools doing a lot of different things. So some schools will do similar to what we're doing, some won't. Some schools will just start year 11 and year 11. It's a great question because I know that has been a concern. It's something we've discussed a lot internally. Rest assured that in year 10, what we've done is redesign our units in such a way that essentially, if you look at the Unit 1 syllabuses, some of the work, in fact, a lot of it in Unit 1, which is designed essentially to be Semester 1, Year 11, is no harder than what a lot of subjects would do in Year 10 anyway. In fact, there's always some double up. So we've redesigned our courses in such a way that we've just reshuffled them. So in a lot of cases, what they're doing in Term 4, Year 10 would have possibly or probably been Term 4, Year 10 anyway, but is also in a Unit 1 course. So the students, if we didn't tell them this, wouldn't even notice the difference. I guess if we're concerned about students starting at the start of Year 11 here, chances are most, if not nearly all the work they've missed in Term 4 here, they will have covered in their previous schools in Year 10 anyway if we design our course in that way.
Just a related question to the previous one about your general preparedness for this change, because I've seen with some of the subject selections for grade 10 next year, there are a couple, you're opening yourself up, or we are opening ourselves up to the national assessment regime, which does that mean that all of our subjects are becoming aligned with those that are offered elsewhere? Because I saw a couple of, for example, follow-ons from graphics. There's a technical drawing or something. There was 2 options, and it seemed like at least one of them wasn't well developed yet. So I'm just wondering whether we are folding into a set of subjects that are basically the same across the country now, because the assessments are going to be effectively the same.
Yeah, Queensland will still set its own assessments, but essentially what you're saying is quite accurate. In most states now, the subjects will be very similar. We've based a lot of the naming of our subjects is the same names as what they have in Victoria, for example, but New South Wales and Victoria have different names, but they're very similar subjects, and we will now have a very similar system to those as well. So Australia-wide, every system still has a state-based system. So primarily it's the ATAR that lines us up, but in doing so, a lot of those subjects will now also be very similar to those subjects. Yeah.
Excuse me. I just have a question about the assessment. I have no understanding of this current system, so I can't compare it, but when you have 4 units and in the majority of subjects a 25% external exam, in the end, they're all in the end, I gather, all external assessments.
Yes.
Is that covering the topics that are now being started at the end of grade 10?
No, the intent is to cover units that have been studied in units 3 and 4.
So units 1 and 2 are still going to be assessed internally?
Yes, and that will count. That won't count towards their ATAR.
Right.
So, and our message from the QCAA is we can do whatever we want in units 1 and 2. So the real intent of units 1 and 2 is to prepare the kids well for units 3 and 4. But in terms of the assessment, what we will do is we will use them as well in terms of the assessment to prepare them for the assessment in Year 12. That's a very tactical and logical approach to use. But in terms of being assessed in Year 12 through ATAR, units 1 and 2 won't contribute towards that.
So Year 12 is the only year that counts, and
Correct.
that will be the 3 75% assessment and the 1 25-piece assessment will all be in grade 12 with the external one at the end of the year.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Except for maths and science.
Oh, sorry, except for maths and science, which are 50% each.
Sorry, I have another question. Just with that external exam, so that's a per subject external exam then? So they would sit that and that compares them against everybody else in the state who's doing that subject, is that right?
Yes, but they're not. They're not going to use the external exam to actually be what weights the subjects. If that's what you mean, no, it won't. That will just contribute, as John said, so they can see their marks build. They'll do that. That just adds to their marks. But then statewide, they will compare subject against subject using comparisons between subjects. Essentially, I think John showed the way that Term 4 is structured. 3 weeks back at school, it looks like they'll have, and then a 3-week exam block, followed possibly by a week back at school after that exam block. So normally what most states were doing, and Queensland will essentially be the same, early on in the year they'll get an exam timetable. So they'll probably know in March or April when their exams are. In November they'll put in a timetable that early, and over that 3 weeks their subjects will be spread out as best possible.
I'm wondering, are there any composite classes in Nudgee's senior schooling?
Currently, we don't really have composite classes. I think there's potential for Japanese and smaller subjects to do that. In the new system, it's very, very difficult. In fact, the QCAA have had a lot of difficulty trying to rationalise how that might work, and it's still a little bit unclear as to how it might work, but it's not an issue. We don't really have a system that, we're a bit lucky here, we don't run off composite classes, so it's a little bit out of our realm of our priority. Really, it's not
A lot of schools do have composites.
A lot do, yes, yeah, but we don't. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a question for those students going into year 9 with their electives. You said there were 4 electives for the year 9 students. Are you, other than music and Japanese, are you encouraging them to switch? So they're actually doing term 1 and 2 of a or 2 subjects, and then doing terms 3 and 4 a different subject?
Yes, correct, yep.
So if, say, they did PE term 1 and 2, they couldn't do it 3 and 4 because it would be the same subject matter?
Yeah, that's correct, yep.
Okay.
Except for Japanese and music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Just with the final exams in Year 12, the external exams that happen at the end, are they going to be supervised by a independent examiner, as they do in New South Wales? Having been presiding officer at the last school, it was someone external came in, supervised those exams. Is that what's happening in Queensland?
Yeah, there'll be an external element to people coming and supervising those exams, yes. Right, there was an awkward pause, so I'm going to take the opportunity to thank everybody for coming once again. Can I also thank Lara and John for presenting tonight. Hopefully you've gained some insight into what we're doing. You may still have more questions. You are more than welcome, and we would strongly encourage you to continue to ask questions. As I said tonight, we're still here for a little while if you want to come and ask us. But if you do think of more questions in the next few weeks or nights, then please email or phone or touch base with us. I'm more than happy to help you. It's very important that as you think of questions or have questions, please get them clarified as soon as you can. That way we can move forward and focus on what we should be focusing on, and that is providing your students with the best education and you with the best advice on their pathways. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention this evening. Thank you.
Good job.